the law says. They need to be 18 and it's a male and a female. After that, you get married. If you're getting married in church, you approach the leadership, they do the necessary notifications, you confirm that your marriage complies with the edicts of the church, you get married, you get your certificate. If you're going to the ages, etc., etc. So we don't have time, but Kenya recognizes different forms of marriages. The challenge is that sometimes people live together. You know, I call it progressive marriage by a toothbrush. So when I come visiting, the next time I come, I leave a toothbrush. The next time I leave a blouse. The next time I leave my lasso. Then I leave an overnight bath. So I call it incremental marriage. Then at some point, now I have a baby there. Then when we meet you, we ask you, oh, then you say, I'm Mrs. So-and-so. You got married by leaving your toothbrush. Some time back, the Kenyan law was very accommodating and it said, we can give you presumption of marriage. Those of you who grew up around my time, there's a game we used to play called Kalongo. So you'd even pretend you're a family. What the law has said now, when you just live together like that, that is a marriage Kalongo, okay? The law is moving away from recognizing presumption of marriage. People who are just that because at night when the door closes, we are on the same side, we are married. That's not a marriage, okay? So what the court is saying, what the laws say is you must formalize. And I don't want to get into the debates as to whether church members should be going to AG or coming to church. That we can have a discussion another time. So those two are not married. As far as the law is concerned, there is no marriage there. And you'd have seen a decision that said having a child with somebody doesn't make you a spouse. Yeah, having a child with somebody, parenting and marriage are two different things. They are not the same, okay? So don't say you're married because how to know watoto. Now, a related question I've seen here is, our law now says you register your marriage and you are allowed to sign a prenuptial agreement. The prenuptial agreement says we are getting married. If things go wrong, let's not quarrel. This is how we will manage our affairs. Okay? And the question that has been posed is, should Adventists sign a prenuptial agreement? I'll give my personal view, but the church leadership are here. When I took my vows, it said, until death do us part, isn't it? Now, when you sign a prenuptial, you're cutting the thing. Even before you take your vows, you're saying, let's get married, but. Don't you want to be cautious about someone who tells you, let's get married, but? Is that how we should be entering up? But that's my personal view. The law recognizes it. You can sign the prenuptial agreement. In that agreement, you set out, if you have children, what do we do? If we have property, this is how we manage it. And whatever other issue may have arisen. So those who argue for the prenuptial, it says it minimizes the chances of an ugly divorce. But any one of you who's ever signed an agreement with another human being, you will know it is one thing when you sign the agreement, and it is another thing when you want to enforce it. So you tell me if you can't agree on whether or not somebody sold you land, whether or not you're going to agree that you are married. So that's that for me. So those two should. But I am what they call a positivist in law, that I take the black and white, and my understanding of the law is that the two people need to be 18, and that will be wedded. So I don't know whether the church insists on parental consent. Pastor will guide us. But there are certain situations indeed where we must waive parental consent if it's blocking. Is there a difference between can an affidavit be the same as a marriage certificate? It has been said you cannot marry by affidavit. Please, if what you have as your marriage is an affidavit, that's not a marriage. Yeah, because to be married, you have to appear before a person who is lawfully empowered to conduct a marriage. Neither of you two can conduct a marriage. So you can't sit in your sitting room and say, let's swear an affidavit. In those days when we used to assume marriages, that would help you towards assuming that kalongo is a marriage, okay? But you cannot marry by affidavit. Pastor, I need your protection. Sodom and Gomorrah, whether the law can do. One of the things that I shake when I'm sitting in court is that one day, as happened in South Africa, someone will come and say that our laws are discriminatory. Because you see, our constitution says everyone has a right to a family. And then it says marriage can only be a man and a wife. But to be a family, you don't need to be married. Okay? You don't need to be married. That's why you're in the same family with your grandmother. She's not your wife. That's why your brother is your family. You're not married. So to be a family, you don't need to be married. One of my genuine fears is that someone will test that constitution, because in South Africa it was tested, and they said, why discriminate against a gay couple not to adopt? And the court said it's discriminatory, allow them to adopt. I think a day will come in Kenya when someone will say, it's discriminatory not to recognize what I have as a family. So that's something. I myself sit up and say, I hope by that time I'm working in master's, and that file does not come to me. But these are some of the, when you wrestle with the secular constitution and what we know to be our religious standards, and Kenya is not a religious state, so you cannot import our religious values into the laws of the country. So as an individual, I'm very clear that God is very clear on same-sex marriage, but there is vagueness, there are gray areas, even in our constitution. What is my view on plastic surgery? Someone has said a joke, especially us ladies, we are notorious for altering our appearance, that when we get to heaven, we will have to persuade God that it is me. And God will say, no. This is not you. And you'll be saying, it's me, God. I only changed my color and my nose and the angle of my eyes and maybe tucked in my stomach. But ni mimi. So I think when we go for plastic surgery, except that it is medical, I think you've seen people are in accidents, they get burned. The damage is corrected by plastic surgery, isn't it? But there are people who do it for cosmetic effect, isn't it? You see, having a flat tummy by sit-ups is going to take you too long. So you go for a tummy tuck, I'm told there's something called a balloon nowadays you can swallow. I don't know what it's called. There's a tablet you swallow, and then you get a balloon. So there are all manner of things that people are doing. I'm not qualified to speak on the subject except as a 50-year-old woman, 50-plus-year-old woman who judges young girls. I say that on a light note. But the point really is that I think if we start with medical providers and they tell us that elective surgeries, especially for cosmetic, sometimes are harmful, we want to listen. There's been a big, if we go back to the whole LGBT whatever debate, and those who say they are transgender, they say, you see me as female, but I am a man in a female body. So they start taking hormones, and then they go for surgery, so that they also have the parts. Okay, so men will swallow hormones that will give them breasts and corrective surgery, so that their genitals are female. And females likewise will create artificial genitals so that they are male. But the horror of horrors is that person who has taken on a male body is the only one who can conceive. I think so that even if Pastor today says he is a woman in a male body, he is unable to conceive because he cannot import a uterus, whatever he does. And those who are engaged in this circus are slow to conceive that surgery is extremely harmful, the effects to those who have done it. But it's all hushed up. But if you have friends in the medical field, they will tell you that those who have dared to take the hormones and the corrective surgery, it is one big fire. But they will not be public about it. A moral dilemma, you're a medical provider, a child of 17 years shows up and says, give me my termination. Even the doctors have recognized, and in their protocols they have said, if you are unable to provide it, refer them to somebody else. And this is what I would do. Refer that child to somebody else. It is not in your place to put your foot down and say, I'm not giving it to you, so you will not have it. In the other jurisdictions, and I speak more as a lawyer, what has happened is you open yourself up to liability in the event that it goes wrong. So you're within your rights to say, I will not do it, knock on the next door. I will not do it. So if you're married and your spouse gets into another relationship and they have a child, and what do you do? What happens to that child if the couple decides to come together? Pastor, I think because this is what I do on a daily basis, although these people are young, but what I have found, and I tell my sisters, because when we take the vows, we say through sickness and health, isn't it? Kwa mabaya, kwa mazuri. I always ask myself, what is this I'm unable to forgive my husband after my experience of forgiveness with God? Because sometimes we really take a tough position and we say, I can never forgive. Ndoa imeisha. He has gone, he has a child outside the marriage, it's over. I have now been married for 31 years. I'm convinced there is no better man on earth than Kenya. I'm waiting for someone to persuade me otherwise. And not because he is perfect, but we have arrived at a point of understanding. And I always tell people, marriage is the only institution God took time and said, I'm setting up this one. He married a couple. And I think it is also a dilemma because the current culture is don't accommodate. I saw in today's newspaper, a decision has been made that a marriage can be terminated when there is no more love. Yeah, I wish they knew that there are days in the house. It's just quiet. It's just quiet, but you are married, isn't it? But the currency that's being sold is that a good marriage is the one you keep somersaulting on each other. Yeah, every time you meet each other, it's like magnet. You know the way a magnet cannot pass a metallic object? Say that's the optimal marriage. Tukikutana we are, isn't it? But the truth of the matter is that you are two sinners in need of salvation. That's my attitude towards how we should be thinking about our marriages and how we nurture them. Children born out of wedlock, ask yourself as the person who is accepting this child, what is the fault of this child? Recently, I came across a very moving case I had the privilege of considering, and this man, very interesting, just in a public transport, that's the last thing then I see. In a public transport, he met a lady. They agreed to engage in an activity that resulted in a pregnancy. On a public transport, you're riding from here to town. You're seated next to a lady. You get into a conversation. I said, this is truly amazing. I didn't know people operate like this. Anyway, she got the child and announced to him, by the way, that encounter has resulted in a child. He said, what? Me, I was in it for the fun. I didn't think there was a child. He said, now there's a child. What will you do? He said, okay, I'm a gentleman. Here is money for maternity. Here is what. She died while getting that child. Now, the relatives said, we want this child, but keep supporting. He said, no. Kama ni mbaya ni mbaya. So I think he told his wife, by the way, kulienda hivi. So the wife showed up and she said, give me that child. Give me that child. And now these ones are throwing tantrums and says, no, we want him. And the man said, my wife wants him, I want him. Give me that child. And I said, that wife, people are getting Nobel Prizes. I want to nominate her. I want to nominate her because she said, give me that child. And they have grown children. Their children are in their 30s. And she said, and the court said, but she said, give me. Kama mtoto anawasumbua, give me that child. So I just want to talk. I have no hope of converting the men here because I know men, some, not of the remnant church, are determined to be hit and run. But I just want to tell my sisters here in the room, before you settle with a man, you're well advised, have a checklist. Kabla ukue hit, have a checklist. And say the man I'm looking for has to have, you must have your non-negotiable, isn't it? Irreducible minimums. That you say, he must be God-fearing. He must treat me well. He must, you have your list, irreducible. And you tell yourself, if someone doesn't make this cut, better I be referred to who are the person, isn't it? Then instead of compromising, and then now you start telling us, oh, I don't want to talk because someone might be in a situation. But what I want to say is after this person has met your irreducible minimum, then you must be like the dog that has seen a bone. You don't release, regardless. Regardless. Your man, your husband has got to know you are here to stay. And in my experience, that is when things stabilize. Tragically, my experience, as I've said, my practice of the law has largely been in family law. And tragically, many of us enter marriage nowadays as an option. So you say, I'm married, but I'm here for the fun part. But kiumana, you know how we talk, sisters. Me, I don't take rubbish. I can't take rubbish, isn't it? I don't take nonsense. God takes your nonsense, by the way. God takes a lot of your nonsense. And before you start telling another human being, I'll not take your nonsense. I've always said, when I divorce Ken Nyaundi, I want to have a reason that when I appear before God and he says, that vow you took before me and you broke, why? I want to have a reason that when I'm explaining to God and saying, this is how Ken and I got divorced, God will say that. Hata mimi niliona. Hata mimi niliona. There you are. Come and inherit the kingdom. May God bless you.
Thank you so much.